Hey guys, Dr. Snellgrove here, just recording a quick video for our 1102 class, our second major essay, the poetry essay. And I have what, depending on your perspective, personality, and preferences, might be considered good news or bad news. And so I think my face-to-face classes seem to like it. I guess time will tell as they start writing on it. But basically, you have a lot more creative freedom with this particular essay. So if you remember back to essay one, it was a little more on rails, if you will, kind of a video gamer term, but a little more on rails in the sense of like, hey, you want to write about, this story? Well, here's your prompt. I mean, you always have the freedom to come up with your own prompt, but most people are just like, I guess I got to write whatever he wants me to write about, boys and girls or whatever. So with the poetry unit essay assignment, you can view this on Canvas now. It's saying that, we want you to first start by picking any poem, hopefully a poem that you like, or I sometimes joke, a poem that's, you didn't hate, a poem that stuck with you a long time. And you want it, of course, to be a poem where you feel like there's a lot going on, you have a lot to say about it. We'll get to that here in a minute. But here's the deal. All we're asking you to do, I know it's easier said than done, is come up with a thesis about what you think the writer wants the reader to learn from the poem. And I was inspired to do this because with the fiction essays, the problem I ran into sometimes was I don't know if they were doing it on purpose or not. I would have students that would just kind of like turn the essay prompt around and call it a day. So I would say, how does Alice Munro, question how gender roles are created and reinforced? And I would get to a paper and be like, thesis. Alice Munro questions how gender roles are created and reinforced. I'm like, it's not really an argument. That's just like kind of an observation or, even a surface level, like most people who read that, wouldn't disagree with you. So it's not very argumentative, and almost everyone who's read the text would agree with you. So what I'm hoping here is, well, I maybe should back up a little bit. For the students that were having that problem with essay one, what I almost always recommended was for them to go a step further. Like, hey, can you tell me how, what do you think she wants the reader to take from this story? It's like, what, hey, she's questioning this. It's like, okay, yes. Why? What do you think she wants us as readers to get out of this? So now that's basically the entire prompt here for the poetry essay. It's like, develop a thesis about what you think the reader what the writer wants the reader to learn from the poem, right? So if you wanted to write about Hades, for instance, that weird Hades poem, you could talk about, I've had one student today, for instance, tell me they wanted to write about that poem and they were going to have a thesis like, the poet is arguing, the poet wants the reader to be aware of the banality of evil and how it's all around us, something like that. And it's instantly argumentative because the millisecond you're like, here's what the writer really wants us to think, not everyone who read that, trust me, I do this professionally. You say in a room, like, I think this is the interpretation of the poem, at least half the people, no, that's not it. So you have a built-in thesis. It's nice and it's argumentative. Now, with that being said, there are certain, things I recommend to help you, because it is still a 5-page essay, still a research essay, all the usual stuff applies. So I have a section down here, recommendations. Pick a poem you really have a lot to say about. So I've been teaching a long time. I know that a lot of students, their impulse is more or less to, just grab and go. Like, I guess I'll write about this poem here. And it's like, well, okay, that might work. If it's getting you good grades, it's getting you good grades. But typically, it's easier to pick a poem that you think you have a lot to say about, a poem that spoke to you, or sometimes even a poem that made you mad. Like, I got a lot to say about this guy. Something like that. That is fine. Also, do some research ahead of time to make sure there are some sources that will go with your thesis. Now, I know some of you hearing this are like, I always do that. Why is he emphasizing this? Again, I've been teaching for a long time, and I know the typical young writer mode is I'm going to go ahead and come up with my arguments, and then later I'm going to find some research that maybe agrees with me, helps me make these arguments. However, some of you may have already had this experience before. You can run into the problem when you do that of, oh crap, I've done all this writing, but now I can't find any, research that really helps me out. So it's like, hey, please, for the love of God, ahead of time, do some research to see if you can find some sources that will help with your thesis. Now, I'm always happy to help you find sources. If you're just, hitting the wall like Dr. Snellgrove, I can't find any sources of this damn paper. If you email me, I will do my best to find you some sources. You don't have to use them, but I'll shoot them to you. I will hope, I hope it will be helpful to you, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's like you can't. They could be sources about the poem. That's a slam dunk typically. They can be sources about the poet in some cases, depending on, you're writing about authorial intent. So sometimes looking into the author's life can help reveal, what they really think, what they want us to think about what they have written. But sometimes you can go, I hate this phrase, but you can think outside the box a little bit, right? Like some of you did this when you were writing about Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat. And it's like, hey, I'm going to diagnose that, this guy's suffering from toxoplasmosis. It's like, okay, well, now you're going to have at least a source or two about this like medical condition. So it has nothing to do with the story or the poet or with the story or the writer or anything, but it still helps you make the argument. All right. And then I put a thing down here. So this is always part of the outline process. Do your best to come up with as many potential supporting arguments as possible. Between this and finding good sources, it makes a world of difference when it comes to hitting the full 5 pages. So I'm pretty arbitrary typically on outlines. I'll have stuff like, hey, come up with at least 4 supporting arguments, something along those lines. But as some of you know from experience, you start writing your like 5-page paper, 4 argumentative points isn't always enough. So you might want to come up with as many as possible. It's always better to have more arguments, and it's always possible, or it's always preferable to have more arguments than you need than to need more arguments than you have. And I already mentioned it, but 5 pages, double space, works cited doesn't count as the page, MLA format, Times New Roman, font size 12, all this fun stuff. But that's about it. By the time you are watching this video, there should also be an outline assignment online. So as always, please, if you have questions, it could be questions about the new essay, questions about the outline assignment, questions about grades, old or new, all that fun stuff. Feel free to email me. Feel free to text me at 863-835-2399. Y'all have a good one. Bye.